Well, we've made it. The final numbers are in. I waited all day for exactly this so that we could talk about the state of Silver Age. And, well, let's not bury the lead. Let's go ahead and talk all the way through it as we start back at week 1 of Skirmish season number 14. This was the season going into it. We all kind of knew that Ira Crimson Haze was placing itself as the best deck in the room, with a couple of other decks making surprise surges to the top spots, including, but not limited to, both Briar and Icelander, of course, going about it in different ways. Icelander sort of coming out of the blue, pun intended, and Briar reviving from the dead. The cycle of decay did not yet hit Briar because she was still alive, and that's what you can see there in week number 1. Ira, the clear front runner, the top dog. 25% of the wins that were secured on week number 1 were done so on the back of Ira. 47 total wins, with Briar and Icelander actually tied, perfectly balanced, as all things should be, at 22 wins apiece. And then, of course, right behind you had KO, Oldhim, and after that point, you've got a tie between Phi, Kano, Riptide, and Volda, with a smattering of other heroes. But, of course, the top 3 to 5 heroes being the ones you would talk about the most, and there are no real surprises within there. Now, one thing that you should look at, and the simple caveat here, is that we don't have a massive representation of Kano players picking up wins across the board. And yet this is a hero that is likely going to see the chopping block and sit down for a season, which is really funny because in week number 1, Kano not being really well represented, having a really tough Ira matchup, having a unfavored, I'll put it just that way, unfavored Briar matchup, and then a coin flip matchup at best into KO. You're not looking very positive if you're just going to sit down and play Kano over and over again, which is why we saw like big name players move off of the hero in favor of either big spikier heroes like KO or Ira Crimson Haze. So that was week 1. It sort of set the stage. Into week 2 we go, and 26% of the wins are gobbled up by Ira Crimson Haze. Icelander takes over that number 2 slot with 11%, falling just 1 percentage point from the previous week, from 12% to 11% respectively. And now Kano shows up tied with Oldhim for that 3rd spot at 8% of the metagame. And there is the hero that I think people are so terrified of, doing reasonably well, if you even want to call it that, at 8%. I would say that's reasonably well. In fact, so reasonable that it actually passed up KO on the weekend, and Briar as well, which fell all the way down to 6th place, which is certainly saying something. Now, other sort of meta contenders that didn't show up this weekend as well, Volda, even though, if I remember correctly, if we look back at week 1, Volda had only 7 wins. Volda going up to 10 wins on the second week only made up about 4% of the total wins. So, I mean, you can look at this in one way or the other, and it's all based on how you read the data. By the numbers, she won more events, but her overall percentage was less because probably there were more events that fired. I'm not, going through and counting all of these numbers as we go. We're just getting a lay of the land as we see it. And Volda not being one of those heroes I think I would keep my eye on for rotation purposes, it is interesting to see that that was a hero that performed rather well at major events, and yet is somewhere in the middle of the pack as far as overall win percentage is concerned. Of course, there are far more heroes down there at the bottom with less than 1% of the meta sort of claiming that spot. So still in the mix, but decidedly in the background in week 2. And of course, we move on to the final week, which just came out today, and Ira Crimson Haze maintains the quarter to quarter plus percent of the meta share wins at 26% wins this week with 53 wins. Briar immediately usurps the second place throne at 24, technically tied with Icelander at 24 as well. KO at 17, Oldhim at 14 wins apiece. Volda takes 9, and then there's Kano again with a smattering of other heroes, and Dorinthia showing up as a possible answer to some of these hair on fire decks that don't really want to put cards in front of you and turn them sideways, maybe a good answer to, the meta game as a whole. But what do we glean from all of this information from week over week? Well, we see this, and this is where we need to talk. Ira, Crimson Haze. I've said it, and I've said it, and I've said it. 3 weeks now. Ira is that dominant deck. And I want to point this out, and I'm going to tab back over here. The first week I made the video, I had made a video the week before about how we all kind of missed it. We all thought KO was that overpowered deck that needed to be dealt with, and it wasn't dealt with. We didn't leave room for the meta to adjust. And so someone down in the comments, when I pointed out that Ira was in a commanding first place spot, rightly said, everyone calm down, stop freaking out, because the meta needs time to adjust. And you know what? That person is technically correct. The meta does have the capacity to shift. People could conceivably try to answer Ira. So did they? No, they did not. They could not answer Ira. Ira continued to be the best deck in the room on any given tournament. It continued to be 25% of the meta wins, not even the meta share, but the wins of the tournament. 1 out of every 4 tournaments was won by Ira Crimson Haze. If that doesn't say that something is going to be done, or at the very least needs to be done, I don't know what does, because 25% of the meta just being immediately claimed by a singular hero, I wish I could say that I was surprised, but think back to all of the other young hero, or just all of the other formats, I guess Classic Constructed notwithstanding, because Ira is not necessarily as big of a factor as she has been in other formats. But if you're looking at, Blitz and her ability to play in that format and immediately kind of blink out of existence. I wouldn't say immediately, but she very quickly hit the Living Legend status in Blitz. And of course, in Commoner, she was quite potent, one of the best decks, didn't have a rotation in that format, and so she was just one of the best decks. Here, she's one of the best decks again. And here, rotation functions differently. There is no Living Legend system. It's just a benching. And you know what? I don't know if the community is going to do it or if LSS is going to do it themselves. And honestly, I'm not sure that you can really put it in the hands of one or the other. And so I'm kind of confused, because on one hand, that's clearly the deck that people should vote for if they want the meta to shift, if they want a new puzzle. The deck that you would vote for is one of those top 3 decks, and I'm not sure Iyslander is really the deck to vote out. Iyslander almost feels like a knee-jerk reaction to decks like Briar, to decks that are sort of red line, like Phi, to maybe even your Iras to some degree, to a KO, that type of deck where they have a very specific thing they want to do with some resources, or you can play a very efficient game plan into them. That's what Iyslander strikes me as a comeuppance of. That is the reason that I think she is so well represented, because she can turn all of these red line decks into kind of a I hate my life situation. But Ira just doesn't have that axis to attack her on. Yeah, you can try dominated damage. You kind of have to just go dominate. And Valda can kind of do that, and Bravo Flattering Showman can kind of do that, but it clearly hasn't materialized over the past 3 weeks. And so, do you choose to vote the hero that is so obviously in need of nerfing or benching? Is that the choice? Because if you do that, then so does everybody else. This is the classic everybody gets a vote, and then everybody just overwhelmingly votes for the majority, and so that very small minority that formed a voting block ends up controlling the actual effects of it all. That's it's a crazy thing to engage with, because by all accounts, Ira Crimson Haze should earn a large percentage of votes for benching just based on her ability to play in the format. And so if that's not the case, like, who are you going to vote for? Like me personally, I'm going to be voting for Briar, even though I recognize that Ira is the most problematic hero based on this data. I'm going to be voting for Briar because I understand that if for some reason the community all assumes that everyone's just going to vote Ira, so they're going to cast their vote somewhere else, I think LSS would step in and actually do something about Ira. I don't even think it's necessarily that they're going to ban anything, because outside of like literally just taking the daggers, like just take both harmonized Kodachis, but that just doesn't feel right. Outside of that, I'm not sure you're touching very much on that deck to make it worse, that much worse, to pull it out of the top 3. It's just so consistent. It's just so consistent. So, like, I don't even think they're going to necessarily make major bans to try and keep the hero around. I think it just earns a bench. And maybe every single time it's back, it just earns another bench. Maybe this is another chain situation. And then what goes after that? I am of the opinion that I think Briar is certainly claiming one of those spots. I think it would be right. I have heard so much groundswell in the world of voting Kano, and I think that is farcical, but I understand why, because people don't like losing on their turn, and they also don't enjoy the deck building cost of playing against a hero that requires 3 new pieces of equipment. I get it, but it is an axis that you can choose to engage with or choose not to engage with, and if you choose not to engage with and lose, it's kind of on you. At the same time, I think it's kind of hilarious that the deck that has, well, let's see, 1, 2, 3 bad matchups out of the top 5 is likely going to get voted. Maybe it deserves it. Maybe it just needs to sit down. You know what? It doesn't bother me none, because at least I get to play Blaze. Nevertheless, it is indeed a hero that I think people are going to vote. I think Kano is going to be sitting down. I think Ira is going to be sitting down one way or the other. The question then becomes, what's that third deck? Or in this case, what's the fourth deck? Because if the developers sit Ira, and if the community votes Briar and Kano, does KO go? Maybe. KO is certainly potent. I mean, look at the screen. Certainly possible that KO goes. I don't think people are going to like charge, chomping at the bit to vote Iyslander down. I think some people could be a bit, put off by Oldhim. But I'll be honest, I don't think Oldhim is really making waves as far as people being annoyed or hating the playstyle. Yes, of course, you can complain about yellow block 4s, all over the place. But at the same time, like, you can see he's the 5th placed winning deck, and he's not that far off from, falling down the ranks just a little bit. I guess he's about 9 wins away from Kano. Is it really that big of an issue? I don't know. Personally, if I could vote 3 heroes, I would go Ira, Briar, and KO all day. But I know that Kano's on the chopping block, and I know that Ira's there. So do people rally around Briar, or does some other hero go? But our time has finally come. Our votes are going to be cast quite soon. In fact, I think it's as early as this next week. Is that correct? Someone tell me down in the comments below when that's going to happen. I want to hear, who are you voting for? Tell me down in the comments. Tell me why you're voting for them. Form a super block, form a pack, everyone get together, rally around voting a specific hero. I want to hear your thoughts. Maybe you can sway my own decision. Maybe you can make such an impassioned plea that I'll choose to vote for your hero. Maybe you could explain to me why Kano's going to get voted. I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below, because I want to hear from you about these final results and what they mean for the state of Silver Age. If you enjoy this type of content, you want more of it, of course, make the number go to the other number. As always, everybody, thanks for watching.